Hello and welcome to another episode with Virtual Coffee with Ashish. Today we are talking about Azure cloud security, but it's being spoken about from a cloud architect, principles cloud architect to be precise. But I wanted this episode because I've been bringing in a lot of security professionals coming in and talking about what's Azure, what's it like to have a secure Azure build, best practices in Azure. But all of us have kind of been talking about from a security perspective. So this one is for a cloud architect perspective. And I've got a really good person here. But before I bring him on, I just want to quickly say the audio version of this gets available on the link at the bottom. Today's topic is Azure Cloud Security Best Practice for Cloud Architects. And welcome to people who are coming on our Clubhouse as well, who are going to dial in. Now, before we jump onto this, I've got my awesome sponsors. So I'm going to quickly have Nathan from Exonius come in for a second.
Hey, Ashish and Cloud Security Podcast listeners. Thanks for giving Exonius the opportunity to sponsor the show. Exonius does exactly three things. By connecting to existing data sources, Exonius gives customers a comprehensive asset inventory, both cloud and on-prem. It then uncovers security apps, and finally, it automatically validates and enforces policies. Thanks again, and check us out at exonius.com.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Nathan. As always, we appreciate your support for the season. So now, I know it's a tradition in our show. We have a awesome music that we play for the awesome guests we have. So I'm going to get into this. Hey, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming on, man. A great song as well, by the way. So I think I'm going to definitely keep listening to that song straight after this. But welcome to the show, and I'm so glad that you came in, man. So I'm gonna start with the obvious. I've got my cup here. This is Virtual Coffee with Ashish, and thanks for bringing your fake cup, man. Thanks. Cheers. Thanks for this, man.
No, appreciate you having me. Yeah, so this was a gift from my wife. It was our 12th anniversary present.
And right.
I'd still fight a bear for you, not a grizzly or a brown bear or a panda, but maybe a Care Bear. So that's the extent of 12 years of marriage.
12 years of marriage. No, thanks for it. I'm glad you brought it in. But I do also see that you have a massive bottle of water as well. So I don't expect anything less from an Iron Man person as well. So I'm going to get into this. For people who don't know John Savill, I hope I pronounced the last name correctly. I guess, tell me a bit about yourself, man. And for people who don't know you, because you seem to be a lot of things. You're a YouTuber, you're an author, Iron Man, and also happens to be a principal cloud security architect as well. So who is John Savill? How'd you reach where you are today?
Yeah, so I like doing different things. I like to stay busy. I like to kind of continually challenge myself. So I'm doing the Ironmans right now. I got into that about 6 years ago, which is kind of like the swim, bike, run combination. But I've always been into some kind of fitness. I did martial arts from the age of 7. I taught Krav Maga for 10 years. I've done marathons, bungee jumping, scuba diving. But really, fitness and kind of computers was always my passion. From the age of 7, I liked playing with computers. Remember my ZX Spectrum when I was a kid with its 16K of memory. And then really, it just grew from there. When I was 18, I got a job as a VAX VMS systems administrator, which sounded cool, but it was really about changing backup tapes and fetching printouts from the basement for the developers. But then I became a developer. I actually started coding. Then I found Windows NT, and I started a website called ntfaq.com when I was like 19. Yeah. That was like 25 years ago now. And
that's why Twitter handle is NTF.
That's why it's NT. So the story of that is NTFAQ, guys. So I started a website, ntfac.com.
Yep.
And then one day my sister she had a prescription, and I went and picked up this prescription from the pharmacist, and the pharmacist come out and went, "Are you the NTFAC guy?" And I was like, yeah. And so it just kind of stuck in my head that I'm the NTFAC guy. So that's where that comes from, back in the old days of Windows NT. And so I did the website, I did books, I did magazine articles. I just always enjoyed kind of sharing information. People helped me when I got started. I'd be on news groups asking questions, and people would help me. So I'd like try and help back and put the information out there. And then it just kind of evolved. I came to America 15, 16 years ago now. Yeah. And I was sort of in the infrastructure practice for a company. And it's just grown. I've always done some kind of architecture, be it designing software architectures or infrastructure architectures. I've always enjoyed computers. It's always been my passion.
Yep.
And so it evolved very organically over that time. Of course, now it's Azure, and that's the cloud.
All right. And by the way, I've got a few people online, a few people on YouTube as well. Morning, Vineet. And Vineet just mentioned that John is a Superman. I think it's he's just sort of wearing your t-shirt. Yeah, that's the black Superman logo as well right there.
There we go.
By the way, so it sounds like you've kind of have had a lot of history from kind of like from the beginning. So for people, I normally ask this question to my guests quite often. What is cloud security for you? And if you maybe want to put like a Azure angle to it as well, feel free to do that.
Yeah, so I think cloud security to me I think it's a shift. And I think back to, I guess you go back to those days with VAX VMS or anything on premises, we were kind of an island, we were a castle, and we had a moat around us. And we had that moat and we had the drawbridge, and we could drop the drawbridge, but it was one access point. And so the moat was our security perimeter, which on premises is the network. So the network was our security perimeter. We could be very safe in our perimeter, that we just worried about this one kind of entrance to the network, and we would lock that down. Which you start to think about the cloud, well, now we have these other things we're using. Hey, I've got this SaaS service over here, a SaaS service over there. Now I'm using these PaaS services or infrastructure. And so the network can't be that primary security perimeter anymore. It's still important. I might be connecting my network over private connectivity or a VPN over the internet. But there's been a shift, I think. So when I think cloud security, the biggest thing for me is there's a shift to identity becomes now one of those primary security perimeters, because it's that what controls and governs the access to these cloud services. And then when I think about, okay, so if identity is now the big deal, I don't want 50 different identities. That's not good for me, because I'm going to use the same password or forget it. It's bad for my company, because if I leave the company, they can't remove my access easily. And it's bad for the poor other companies maintaining a bunch of accounts that I'm going to forget the password to and have to support that. So then you get into, well, it's now federations. Well, okay, we don't like passwords. We want at least MFA. So now there's MFA. And well, we shouldn't MFA all the time, because I get muscle memory. If I'm constantly MFA'd, I'm just going to click yes, 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 even when it wasn't me. So now I need to say, well, am I elevating my privilege to do something important or accessing something sensitive? Or has there been some risk detected on what I'm doing out the ordinarily, so I should do something else? So we start to move to these federated identities, be it SAML or WSFed or OAuth2 with consent, or it's OpenID Connect. But that's this huge shift. Now, that doesn't mean we still don't have those other aspects. In fact, the cloud introduces new risks to companies that, again, before on premises, I could kind of be that burly guy. I was the admin. And if someone wanted something, they had to ask me for it. Hey, I need a resource. Hey, it needs to be this facing the internet. And I would check it. And I'm the one that would create it. Everything goes through me. If I think of the cloud, I can't do that. Like, it's self-service. It's DevOps pipelines that are continually deploying. And so now the shift is, rather than me being able to stand in the middle of the process, I have to do my work up front. I have to make sure the right guardrails are in place, that I still have those requirements. I still need to be careful about where things are done. But now I have to use technology. So you said from an Azure perspective, things like policy. I use policy to say, well, where can I create public-facing things? What can I actually do with that? Where can I create? And then, of course, you just have the whole shadow IT thing. Like, it's very easy now for someone to say, hey, have credit card. We'll buy shadow IT. And so me as a company now, it's like, how do I manage that? And so you get into this, well, again, I have to start looking at, well, are there things I can kind of do, cloud security, CASB, cloud brokering solutions, to see what are people doing? Where are they going? Can I lock those things down? So there's this massive shift now in all the different things I have to worry about. It's not just that drawbridge anymore. There's this massive different things. Now, the plus side is there's this massive different things, but also now there are these massive solutions to help me. And I think that's kind of a key thing that we leverage. So it's a very long answer.
No, but I think it makes sense as well, because to your point about in on-premise, we had set defined roles for who would do what. And to your point, you always go to a sysadmin. Hey, I want more servers. You wait 6 months, and 6 months later, you get like probably half the size what you wanted because there wasn't enough budget for it or something. Yeah. But now I have the privilege to have a key which gives me access to the entire data center whenever I want within 5 minutes. And I think it's funny, the moment you mentioned all this, and there's already a question coming in from Chris Somasiker. I hope you pronounce his name correctly. What are the ways to notify global admins sign in an event? Is that something that you would know of?
Yeah, I mean, so there's different solutions when I think about sign-in events. So there's things I can do with things like Azure AD Privileged Identity Manager. So that is a solution in Azure where I can kind of set up different alerting. I mean, for one thing, I want to kind of reduce who are those global admins in the first place. I don't like standing privileges. I want to do the whole just-in-time thing outside a few kind of break glass accounts. So what we would then do is, hey, if someone elevates up, I can do alerting around that. I can fire things off. I can do notifications. I could require approvals. But I could also do things like, hey, those Azure AD logs, I can send those to something like, again, in Azure World Log Analytics, which is kind of like a place I can send logs. So it's a place I can send logs from all these different systems, but then I can run analysis on top of it using something called Custo query language. Well, I can have these alerts triggered to say, hey, when I see these logs come in, do this. Now that do this could be fire off a logic app, which is a type of serverless technology that does a series of steps. Hey, maybe I want to go and write this log to somewhere, or hey, I want to do this other type of alert. So there are many ways. All of those things are logged in the logs for Azure AD. And I can get those logs to go to other things, be it just, hey, I just want to store them, or I want to do a notification, maybe something richer. So there are numerous ways I can attack that.
Interesting. And so, yeah, I think we'll get more into this as well. So I think hopefully that answered your question, Chris, and we might get into this a bit more. I've got Nicholas here as well. He's a great friend and also a past guest who love the architect perspective. Let's do this. For people who are on listening on this Clubhouse, you can tap the hand icon if you have a question, and you're going to come on stage to ask a question for Azure Security from John. So I'll move on to the next one while as the show progresses. So you kind of touched on a few topics already from a logging perspective and admin perspective. And for people who may be coming in from, say, AWS or GCP or whatever, like Azure is just like, I have no idea what's going on there. So just to set some context, what are some of the security products that you kind of interact with or you kind of talk about in Azure that are good practices? And so maybe people can use that information or at least a name to go back and Google and find out more about it. So what are some of those services that they should look for or you recommend people look for?
Yeah, so if I think about it, if I was like brand new to Azure and like I've created a subscription, the first place you're going to go is probably Azure Security Center. And so if I think about Azure Security Center, what it's going to do off of the bat, I talked about policy before. And I think about policy, hey, sets of things I'm looking at, and then sets of states I want it to be, and then an action. Maybe it's deny, maybe it's audit. And so Azure Security Center kind of creates this great big initiative, which is a whole bunch of different policies that looks for certain best practices for the resources you deploy. Hey, you're not just putting public IP addresses out there on the internet with RDP. Hey, you're using secure connectivity. Hey, you've got encryption configured on your disk. It's a whole set of these things. And what it does is it actually uses that to give you something called a secure score. So the more of these things you've addressed, hey, the better my score. And it will kind of show you, hey, look, if you do this, you're going to get 30 extra points to your secure score. If I do this, you'll get 10. So I'm like, oh, I want to do the 30-point thing. That's got to be more bang for my buck. I'm going to focus on that. So I'd think about if I was coming in straight away, I'd go to the Azure Security Center. and I could kind of dive in straight away to that secure score. And that will actually give me things that are the biggest bang for the buck, either the biggest impact to my overall security to really get me going. Now, then I start to move on to more advanced things. So that's just free. So I can just use Azure Security Center. Then there's like an Azure Defender for the different solutions. These are a deeper security insights for things like containers or container registry or virtual machines or SQL database or DNS or resource manager that are then tuned to that specific service, looking for key signals that maybe would show me, hey, there's some kind of bad actor going against my service. I've not got this good configuration. So it goes to a deeper level. So I think Azure Security Center, and then there are these various Azure Defender solutions that kind of sit on top of that. Beyond there, we start to get into the whole kind of SIEM and SOAR type solution. So security, incident and event management, and then the SOAR with kind of that orchestration, that automated response.
Yeah.
I talked about log analytics. So I think log analytics is just this big store of logs where I can send stuff from really anywhere. But on its own, that's kind of useless. Like if I just get these having logs doesn't mean I've got good security or good insight. I've just got a whole bunch of stuff. It might be good for forensic purposes after an event, but on its own, I as a human being looking at 10,000 logs, I'm not going to come out with anything super useful from that. So you get this like Azure Sentinel, for example. That's the Azure native SIEM SOAR solution that takes all that data. It's using log analytics, but now applies machine learning on top of that. It actually goes and looks for, hey, look, these signals, and it learns this is indicative of this. Hey, look, we need to actually respond. And so it can alert me, hey, these things are happening. And then I can actually use kind of playbooks to automatically respond to that. If I think, oh, actually, well, this is not a good thing. I want to build on that. I actually want to go and do something else on top of that. So if I was thinking just bare bones core things, I'd start with those. Then, of course, there's things like web application firewalls. There's extensions for things like virtual machines. There's many other aspects to it. But from the core thing, Azure Security Center, no brainer. It's free. I'm going to do that thing. And then I can start to use things like Defender for richer insight security and Sentinel, those types of things.
So it's really interesting because I kind of came from more from an AWS and Google Cloud perspective, and the way I hear this, the more I hear about services in Azure, they seem a lot more focused on, like, it's a platform as a service as well. Whereas it seems like the AWS side, I think it kind of is probably good side angle into what Chris is asking as well over here. He said, awesome, John. One more question. AWS is CloudTrail. So CloudTrail is like an audit trail log. So for all the activity that I've performed within, I guess, say, my AWS account, which is an equivalent to subscription in Azure. So what log must be collected to ensure all API events are collected?
So I can think there's two levels to that. You always think there's kind of the control plane and the data plane. So from a control plane for Azure, that's the Azure Resource Manager. So that's if I'm going in through the REST API or PowerShell or CLI or the portal, if I'm doing something at the Azure Resource Manager level, like creating a resource, deleting a resource, changing a resource. So that's stored in something called the activity log. So every subscription has an activity log, and that's just native. I don't have to pay for that. Everything I do at that control plane is logged at the ARM level into that activity log. Now, it's only kept, I think it's maybe 90 days or 93 days. There's some time limit on that. And I can do things from that. I can actually create kind of certain alerts from that, but I can also send that somewhere else. Like, for example, I could send it to Log Analytics. I can send it to Log Analytics for maybe longer retention, or I can send it to a storage account. Or I could send it to maybe something called Event Hub. So Event Hub, the whole point of that is it's a publish-subscribe mechanism. So I can publish things to it, and something else can subscribe to it to get them. And what's super common there is if I had like a third-party SIEM, it could subscribe to that Event Hub. So I could send all those things to an event hub, and I can pick them up from something else. So that's that control plane. And then I think of the service itself, things happening inside the service, inside the storage account, inside that database. So that's where we have something called diagnostic settings. So diagnostic settings I have to configure. They do not exist by default. It's not capturing those logs. But I can turn on that diagnostic setting and I can say, hey, I want to send it to a log analytics. I want to send it to a storage account. I want to send it to an event hub. I get those same 3 options. I can use any combination of those. So now, and I get to pick, depending on the service, maybe it's errors, maybe it's HTTP requests. There's going to be a whole set depending on the service and metrics. I can now send them somewhere to get the more that data plane insight into it as well. So if all I care about is the kind of Azure API layer, that's the activity log.
Yeah.
It's there by default. I can't turn that off. It's always going to be there. But it has a finite retention period. Or I can then send it to somewhere else as well for a configurable retention or something just external.
Sweet. Awesome. And I think there's one more question from him is the Defender or Azure Security Center standard required for endpoint security, malware, vulnerability scanning, or free ASC is enough?
So, there's things like the sort of Windows Defender I can add as an extension.
Yeah.
So that's just there. I can use that for free. Things like Linux have kind of their own engines around that as well. And then there are solutions in Azure, for example, there's an update management solution. And that gives me then that orchestration capability to kind of, track what patches are you missing. And funnily enough, that uses log analytics. So it uses log analytics to capture the state and what it's missing. And then something called Azure Automation today to then actually go and drive and say, hey, go and update. And it's using the native features of the OS. So for Windows, obviously, it's using Windows Update. For Linux, maybe it's using YARM or whatever that is. So there's minimal charge because it's going to log analytics, but that's not an expensive thing generally if I'm just using those solutions.
Sweet. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think we kind of mentioned this definitely a no-brainer to start with the Azure Security Center on day one if you're starting today. So it's not people should just do it.
Right.
I've got a comment from Vineet. I've recently did the Microsoft Cloud Skill Challenge. Here's the link. Oh, yeah. So that's a good link for people to kind of, there you go. There's another learning tool. Thanks for that, Vineet. I might switch gears, and I think I've got a few cloud architects listening to this as well. And I would love to kind of get some of your perspective on just the basic foundational pieces, right? I think you kind of touched on this already. We spoke about if you're doing security in Azure, think from a security core, security product perspective, you look at Azure Security Center, Diagnostic, and Sentinel. Like you kind of mentioned the core security products. In terms of a cloud architect starting to build in Azure, like there are obviously some foundational pieces around identity, networking, or maybe even building like an instant response plan or instant response architecture. So keen to know from your perspective, let's start with identity first. How would you go about setting the right foundation for identity? And obviously, I understand depends on the solution, but keeping it very high level.
No, so Azure uses Azure AD. So Azure AD is kind of the Microsoft identity provider solution. And it has AD in the name, but it's not AD. Obviously, AD is great for on-prem with Kerberos and NTLM and all of that. None of that applies to the cloud. So Azure AD is all about, hey, OpenID Connect and OAuth 2 and SAML and WS Fed. It has things like conditional access. So, hey, I can control based on maybe risk factors and what app you're trying to access, what controls I want. Maybe it has to be a known device. It has to be a hybrid device. Maybe I want you to do an MFA. So that conditional access is really a super important thing when I think about identity. Because again, I can do just MFA, but we don't like that just MFA constantly. It's not good for anyone. So conditional access lets me do things like, hey, I want MFA if I'm accessing this privileged app. Or maybe I'm detecting you're from an unknown location, or I'm detecting some elevated risks through an integration with identity protection. So their kind of key things is Absolutely. Get my identity right first, because I think that's kind of that first perimeter. Ideally, I want to do things like just in time. So I hook into things like Privileged Identity Manager. We might have guests, people we collaborate with. So I can do that it's called B2B, business to business. I can bring those in. And then once I get past the identity, before I start thinking about networks or anything else, I have to get the governance in place. Because again, we talked about, hey, on-prem, I have that burly network admin that says, hey, you want this thing. I don't want to give it to you. I want your firstborn, then I might consider it at some time in the far future. Well, I can't do that in the cloud because we are self-service. We have this infrastructure as code with pipelines that deploy. So I have to get the policies in place. I have to understand first as a company, what is my policy? Like I have to be able to write down, this is what we do and what we expect. Then I can create a policy to enforce that, which will always apply if I'm going through the portal or PowerShell or templates or CI/CD pipelines. So I have to get the policy in place. I might want things like tagging. There's metadata, key value pairs on objects, so I can easily track and find things like cost centers and owners and creation dates. And again, I can enforce that through policy. Naming standards, structure, because I'm going to have role-based access control. So there's things like management groups and then subscriptions and then resource groups, and I put resources in there. So I want all of that in place before I start creating anything. And then absolutely, okay, I'm going to have my virtual networks, and I'm going to have this type of connectivity from on-premises to those virtual networks. Well, I've got other applications, and what are my standards? And so Microsoft have kind of two key resources that I think help with this. So they have kind of this whole cloud adoption framework and these well-architected frameworks. So you can kind of think about these as these best practices and guidance around how I should think about using it, but also have these kind of landing zones, which are basically these things I can stamp down that puts down a certain network config and policy and security to really just put me on a good starting point. So rather than just, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Hey, I can go to one of these things and it will at least get me on a good starting point. I can look at these. There's different sizes. There's different ways to scale these, but it's going to put me on a good starting point.
That's awesome. Because I think we, funny enough, on season 1 last year, we got Nicholas, who left the comment before. He came and spoke about resource managed groups, the multi-tenant, multi-subscription model as well.
Yep.
And I think we had another person come in talk. I think David O'Brien came in and spoke about identity. So I'll definitely encourage people to go check those episodes out to go in a bit more detail. And to your point about the governance side of things, is really interesting. That do you find that when people talk about well-architected framework, like I think I had this contention with CIS, which is the Center of Internet Security. They have a standard. They built one for AWS. It was great for when AWS was just one account. One company would only have ever one account. Great model, works really well. But that CIS benchmark doesn't really scale well. Do you find that similar thing with the frameworks that are there for Azure? Are there any frameworks that you feel like because people might Google, hey, what's a good framework for me to compare to? You mentioned one already in terms of use a well-architected framework. Is there a security framework that people can look at as well? Which probably
so there's actually different types of landing zone. So one of the things you can actually do, am I a small company, am I a medium, am I a large company? Am I going to have one network, or am I going to have multiple kind of spokes I need to consider? Maybe I'm even multi-tenant. So there are actually different landing zones based on the type of company I am. And to your point about kind of, Microsoft just did a new security kind of Azure Security benchmark it's using now for Security Center. So they've actually evolved that to actually encompass a lot more things than what it used to be.
Right.
So they've actually literally, I think 3 weeks ago, they kind of switched over to a new security benchmark to really bring a lot more things into it.
And that's from Azure. That's not like a CIS benchmark.
That's Azure.
Wow. And that, I'm assuming then that scales across a multi-tenant or a multi-subscription model then?
Right. So those kind of, again, that's built on the policies. It's kind of looking at, hey, what do you have? And it's using all of that yes, I can have multiple subscriptions, I can multiple tenants, it's still going to apply.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. So maybe just around that structure, and I get asked this question quite a bit for Google Cloud and AWS. So I'm keen to know from an Azure perspective as well. Like, is there a certain framework you should be going for when you're trying to build for incident response as well? Like, the incident response angle where in AWS people might say, hey, we should have a known template infrastructure as code that we bring up every time there's an incident. I can spring up a virtual network and get my boys and girls to get access to this super important, like a potentially affected virtual machine. Is there like a similar thing that you recommend for Azure?
I think that's where Sentinel would come in. So Sentinel is that kind of incident response capability.
Yeah. But would that give access to the resource as well?
No, so that will initially just kind of, it sees all the telemetry coming in, but then I can use those playbooks, and those playbooks are automated responses. So what I could do through that automated response, again, it's just a logic app, which can really do anything. So I could do things like, hey, I'm seeing this incident coming in, I'm seeing this maybe bad actor. I could do maybe something like, well, I could change the network security groups and I prohibit that IP address. I could go in and change the role-based access control to now give something access to that. I could maybe change a tag on the virtual machine that now puts that VM in a quarantine. So I can do various things through, because it's a logic app and I can do anything, I pick what makes the most sense for me based on what is that signal, what is it telling me is that type of potentially malicious action that's going on against me.
Okay, that makes sense, because why not use the automation to your advantage instead of trying to, okay, that's actually pretty good. Because I've seen that people use like serverless functions for it, which is very similar. Yep. I've got a question from Vineet here. What do you suggest your approach to securely architecting, I think that's what he's meant, a hybrid solution? I think that's where he's going with. So from a hybrid solution perspective, are there different nuances to kind of what you've already mentioned? You mentioned identity, you mentioned networking. What's a specific nuance for a hybrid one?
I don't want to have these two completely separate things. I don't want to think about, well, there's this pane of glass over here and these sets of tools over here, and then something completely different over here. So one of the things you think about if I'm a hybrid is, well, how can I leverage the same pane of glass? Now, it could be I have fantastic tools on-prem, and I want to try and bring those to the cloud. And if it's like virtual machines, I probably could do that. If I have a phenomenal SIM today on-prem, again, nearly every aspect of Azure lets you send things to that event hub that I could pick up from the SIM. So I want to try and keep that same pane of glass. But conversely, maybe I don't have a phenomenal tool on-prem. Maybe I don't have great insight today. So the opposite actually applies as well. So when I talk about things like Azure Security Center and some of the Defender and Sentinel, many of those things can actually now go to on-prem or even other clouds. You may have heard of something called Azure Arc. So Azure Arc lets me do things like take the monitoring, the policy, the metadata, the extensions to servers that could be on-prem. I can do the same things for Kubernetes. As long as it's CNCF compliant, I can use a lot of the Azure capabilities there, and the Defender solutions do that richer, more intelligent scanning and protection for that. And then, of course, there's various data services. So if I'm looking at a hybrid approach, I'm thinking, okay, how can I use the best tooling I can across them? I definitely don't want two things. I want to, as much as possible, try and get that single pane of glass. So if I've got a phenomenal solution today, fantastic. I'm going to try and extend that to Azure. But Azure has a great set of things that if I'm not particularly happy with that over here, I'll stretch it the other way. So I would think about that. I'm trying to say, I want a consistency. If I can bring the Azure things to the other on-prem or even other clouds, which I can do as well, hey, I'm going to do that.
That's an awesome answer. And I think it's worthwhile definitely looking at what you already have from a cost perspective as well. You don't want to be spending just buy another solution for the sake of buying another solution just because it's being called out. So no, that's a great answer. Hopefully that answers your question, Vineet. And you kind of touched on monitoring and visibility as well. And it kind of ties into another question that came from Chris about configuration drift and everything. So from ongoing monitoring and visibility perspective, what do you see people do for ongoing monitoring? Like you mentioned, they could be, instead of having two panes of glasses, one for on-prem, one for Azure, one for AWS, one for Google Cloud, try and bring all of that to one. And is there a pattern that you see that works really well in the whole monitoring, like monitoring a large scale Azure deployment?
Right. So, and again, you talked about kind of configuration drift. So there's two sides to that. So I think about configuration drift of the Azure resource. Again, that's that Azure Resource Manager. So I want to use a declarative technology. I don't want to do an imperative where I'm writing a script, say, create this VM, then configure it this. It's very hard to check, well, is it still that config, and to fix it. So I want to use a declarative technology. So Azure natively is something called this Azure Resource Manager, and it has JSON templates, which, while fantastic for a machine, kind of ugly for a human. It's very verbose and chunky, and it's horrible to write.
Plus it's JSON. So.
Right. I mean, they just released, I think it's like 2 weeks ago, something called Bicep.
Okay.
And so Bicep is actually a language designed to be tooled. It's designed for a human. There's like a plugin for VS Code to easily write this in a declarative fashion. And the huge thing about declarative is I'm stating what I want the end state to be. I'm not telling it how to do it. I'm saying, I want this. I want this storage account. I want it to be globally redundant. I want this container. I want this VM. Make it so, like the whole Star Trek, make it so number one. I don't care how you do it. Just get to where I want to be. Yes, Picard. And so when I'm using those technologies, now I can detect a drift. I can say, hey, this is what I told you I want. Is this still the case? And it can say, hey, yes, or here's the difference. So,
yeah.
And if you talk about DevOps, often what we'll do at the start of a pipeline is we'll just deploy that template. Again, it's idempotent, which means I can run it as much as I want. If it's in that state, it won't do any damage. It won't change anything. But if it's drifted, it's going to bring it back. So that's the Azure. But then there's obviously the resources as well. Now, if it's something like a virtual machine, that's where we get into things like, well, there's Chef and Puppet, there's PowerShell desired state configuration. Again, a declarative technology saying, hey, I want it to look this way, make it so. If it's something like containers, then that's where Kubernetes comes in. Again, I have those declarative YAML files that say, this is what I want in terms of I want these pods, I want this number of the pods. Make sure that's the state. So again, I can kind of detect drift with that. So I think there's a number of different technologies I can use depending on, hey, am I worrying about drift at kind of that Azure Resource Manager level, or am I trying to think inside the service? And so I think there's ways to do it, but it's not, I don't think it's one answer across everything. There's different things, but all of those things I talked about in terms of that data plane, the guests, yeah, I can use the same technologies if it's a resource in Azure or if it's something on premises, like the containers, for example, Kubernetes. It's not some Azure special version. It's fully portable. It's Kubernetes. It's just managed for me. But I could use the same kind of GitOps mentality. Hey, I'm going to point that Kubernetes cluster at this Git repo. Could be private on-prem. It could be GitHub. Well, I can point that in Azure. I can point it on-prem. I can do those things. And it will just use those YAML files in that Git repo to make it so. And I can detect if that drifts, but I can keep it to that.
Awesome. And it's actually a pretty good explanation, because I think I agree. I did not know that's why, because I saw your video on the Bicep thing, and I'm like, I thought you were talking about Iron Man at that point. I didn't realize you were talking about
it's technology.
actual language.
So yeah, if it's not Friday, it means it's a technology. Friday, I might post other things like motivational or mentoring. As long as it's not Friday, then it's a technology video. That's kind of the rule. It's only on Fridays I'll ever post something that's not a technology.
Right. Fair enough. But sounds like a great name for a language as well. I wonder if the person who named it. Yes, go on.
Someone made a comment and they were like, so you have the Azure Resource Manager, which is ARM.
Yeah.
And so now on top of ARM, you're building Bicep. So I don't
yeah.
know that's the reason, but it makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah, now since you put it like that, definitely makes sense. Oh, I mean, I guess shout out to that person who left the comment. Makes more sense
I
as well.
hadn't thought of that, and it's probably really obvious. I'm just dumb. It never occurs to me. But this person was like, "Oh, arm, and you got bicep." I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense."
It's really, and you kind of touched on DevOps as well. So I'm gonna try and address something that's been kind of on my mind. And oh, I just heard my own echo, but I hopefully that went away. So I guess the question that I was going to ask about that from a DevOps perspective is, although Azure has a service called DevOps, but this is talking about the people DevOps, where actual people doing DevOps.
Yeah.
What do you find as, is this the same in the Azure space where DevOps would do a job and in some cases would just hand over the fence to, hey, security, there you go, job done, move on, and which is still very waterfall and used to be like a non-cloud way. Do you still see that pattern happen?
I think the companies that have embraced it, no. I think they realize now security can't be at the end. Security is ingrained in the process. Again, I think it starts with, hey, the governance side. We've got those right policies, but then, hey, we've got the right structure in place for the role-based access control. So we've got the right permissions. Security is also using solutions. Say, hey, I'm using this container repository. Hey, I want to be scanning those images to make sure there's nothing bad in there that then gets pulled into that DevOps pipeline, which then gets deployed. We can now think about, well, our code's checked into maybe it's GitHub, for example. Hey, I've got plugins running in GitHub looking for, I've got some dependency on something that's got a vulnerability. So I'm going to automatically create a pull request to say, we'll use this instead, which has remediated that. Or I've checked in a secret or a key. So no, I don't think it's thrown over the fence because it's way too late at that point. So I think the companies that have got it down, the security is ingrained in all of the steps. Now, to your point, there are companies that haven't. There are companies that maybe you have a team that's, hey, I'm doing DevOps, I'm deploying this stuff out, it's there. And security, like, oh, what do I do now? It's a problem. But I think the ones that are really embracing it, I think it's actually a nice thing. I think one of the things that the cloud has forced in a way is a better collaboration, because I think they've kind of realized it can't be this isolated world, which it used to be possible, because, hey, you had the developers over here, they created something, and it's like, hey, this needs to go into production. Then the security people would take it, they'd create the environment, they'd lock the things down, they'd work with the operations to get it installed. You could kind of separate, and now you just can't if you want to be efficient. Yeah. So I think it's actually maybe brought a bit more. There was this whole mantra that, hey, you can be secure and out of business. You get these very inflexible security teams that we're secure, you can't get anything done, but at least we're secure. Okay, but we've gone bankrupt because we can't do anything. And I think that's moving away now, because those senior executives of the companies like, no, we're embracing this. I want this DevOps. I want this. We're focused now on the business value of anything. And now we can actually think about, we've got this constant deployment of new functionality that differentiates us. But we've got this constant feedback on, is it providing value? So you get this fantastic loop. And so the executives are saying, I want this. We have to do this to survive. So I think it's brought a better cohesion together for the teams.
Awesome. And I think if I put another perspective to this as well, then the Azure security space, do you see any patterns there for what's a maturity pattern like? So to your point, you mentioned, we started this conversation saying you should have Azure Security Center, you should have log analytics. So I'm assuming that's maturity level 1. What's level 2 or level 3 in your mind?
Well, I think security level 1 will probably just be looking at Azure Security Center. I think if I'm just brand new, I'm coming in, my day 1 is go and look at Azure Security Center. I think that's day 1. And then I think day 2, 3, 4, then I'm looking at, okay, what are those Azure Defender solutions that I would leverage, start giving me that richer insight, kind of scanning of my different types of resource. Then I'd be looking at, okay, well, now I need kind of to capture this additional information and do something useful. Again, if I've got an existing SIEM, I want to integrate with that. I'm going to use maybe policy to drive that diagnostic settings to send it the pertinent information to the event hub so my SIEM can take it.
Yep.
If I don't have a good SIEM, hey, I'm going to look at Azure Sentinel and I'll send it to Log Analytics and let it then add that machine learning and all that capability to give me fantastic insight into what do these logs actually mean that I, as a human, have no idea, but it can actually bring me that insight so I can do something useful with it and then automate responses. Those things that I might get in Security Center, like alerts, it can feed into Sentinel as well to give me kind of this one place to go. And again, Sentinel is not just Azure. It's got this massive number of feeds it can get from all different types of services to give me that kind of holistic solution.
And so to your point, you're able to almost use that as a theme. Instead of buying one, you can just use Sentinel as a theme as well.
I mean, the whole point of Sentinel is it's not for Azure. It's a SIEM source solution that I can use for my organization. And so it's fully managed. All I have to do is there's a whole bunch of connectors. I connect it to things to get those signals coming into it. Then it takes care of, okay, this is what I'm going to go and look for. And there's elements where it can say, hey, I'm seeing this when it's seeing something bad, but I can also do things like hunting. It has a whole bunch of this Custo queries that will actually go and look. So something's not happened yet, but I'm saying, well, I want to get indications of maybe something's happening over here. Show me, is that happening? And so I can actually go and hunt on the data to go and find those things.
Yep, perfect. And I'm going to ask this question because I think I've been talking about the good side. I want to do the bad side as well. What's an anti-pattern that you see happen that you kind of want people to not go forward with anymore? Is there any anti-patterns that you see with companies that you work with or say around yourself when people are deploying into Azure?
Joe, I think one of the biggest problems you see is companies treat Azure like another data center. They don't appreciate there is a shift in responsibility. Like, okay, how do I get on the host to check the patches on the physical host? And how do I start doing my network sniff on the wire? And what SAN is it using? And it isn't. So it's not possible. I can't do the same things. But also I'm losing all of the benefit. Like, what is the point in going to the cloud if I want to do? So you get these people that have been data center managers, security managers for 15 years. And it's very hard for them to realize there are some shifts in responsibility. Now, I still need to know about things if from security, but it's a shift in who's responsible. There's kind of these models about kind of these racy models, responsible, accountable, sort of contacted, informed. There's all those different things. So it shifts, and I have to be willing to think about, okay, there are these new types of service and these new responsibilities, but also it hampers my ability to get the benefit from the cloud. If I have this very old school thinking of, I need this agent in the OS so I get this information, well, then I can't maybe go and use things like containers or app services or serverless technologies because you can't put those things in the OS. It's not my responsibility. I have to be willing to kind of trust that cloud provider's doing the job and they're doing good things. So that's, I think, the biggest anti-pattern I tend to see is I do it this way on-prem. I want to do it that way in the cloud. And maybe I can make bits of it work that way, but I'm going to lose a whole set of benefit to it. So that I think is one of the big things I see.
At that point, at that point, you might as well not be there, I guess, to begin with. You might as well still stay in data centers.
Right. I'm not getting all the benefit.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a great answer as well. What I might do is I might let people dig deep into this a bit more outside of this as well, because I'm sure we have a few people who are starting off in Azure as well today. Mm-hmm. And a couple of people messaged me about Azure certification. Is there a pathway for people who probably don't know anything about Azure? They're cloud architects, at least in the AWS space or wherever. What's the pathway to becoming like a cloud architect or a cloud security architect, I guess, in Azure?
Yes, so there's different levels of certification. If you go and look at the certification site, you'll see there's kind of 1-star ones, which are like fundamentals. So they're like very broad, but not deep at all. There's like an Azure fundamentals. There's actually kind of a security fundamentals. There's like an SC 900. I actually did an exam cram video on my YouTube channel a few weeks ago. It's like a 2-hour, just all the key things that get covered in the exam. So you can start there. And I would, if I'm new to Azure, I would definitely look at what's the fundamentals one for Azure. If I'm a security person, okay, so what's kind of the security compliance kind of fundamentals one. And then there are certifications around being an Azure architect. So there's a track, so that's an expert. That's like a 3-star certification. So I could be an architect. But there are also security ones. So again, there's ones about identity. There's ones around kind of operational. So there's a whole set of certs depending on what do I really care the most about. So yeah, there's tracks. So I would start with the fundamentals. Yeah. And then I can kind of build up from there.
Awesome. And I'll let, I think I've got a couple more questions coming in, but I do want to cover your YouTube channel as well, because you kind of mentioned that a couple of times. And for people who have not heard of your YouTube channel, I'll definitely recommend checking it. That's called Savill Tech, though. That's not called John Savill, right?
So that's it's NTFAQ guy. Is the channel. So it's the NT-FAQ guy thing.
Because I get questions from people about they all want to create content, make that personal brand for themselves. And I know you have a very different perspective for why you're creating your own videos. But I wanted to kind of get from you, what got you into making videos, and how often are you uploading right now?
Yeah, so I started off again with the NT-FAQ site, which was just text. So I started off there and I did that for a really long time. And then occasionally, maybe 10 years, I don't even know how long I've had a YouTube channel. I'd have to look, but maybe that 10 years I created it. And occasionally I had a little whiteboard behind my desk. I'd record a little video if I felt something that I love whiteboarding. Like my customers, I whiteboard everything.
You're an architect, so I'm not surprised.
Right. There were certain concepts that words alone were maybe difficult to convey. So I would create a little video, but very, very rarely I was really focused on kind of the FAQs. And then maybe 2 years ago, I stopped doing the FAQs and I started to do, actually I enjoy doing the video stuff more. So I did a couple more videos, but I think it was 18 months ago. I kind of set up a board at home and the touch display, and I just started doing it a lot more frequently. And so now I do about 3 videos a week about technology, mostly Azure. I do like a weekly what's changed in Azure. So I post that every Sunday about 9 Central. And that's just normally 15, 20 minutes about all the new features, any kind of big things. And then I'll normally post Tuesday and Thursday about some aspect of Azure. So yeah, and then maybe Friday I do like a mini mentoring video. Why I got into it is... if you ever looked at me, I believe in kind of 5 core rules that govern me. And I've always lived by a certain code, but I kind of discovered these by Arnold Schwarzenegger. He had these 5 rules for success. And it's kind of have a vision, don't think small, ignore the naysayers, work your butt off, but give something back. And I've been blessed that I have a great job. I enjoy my job and I earn a good living and provide for my family. And so for me to give something back is my YouTube channel. So I have no advertising. I have no Patreon. I have nothing. I earn no money through that channel. It's just a way that I can help people learn the technology. And I enjoy doing it. It's something that it's my hobby. It's my kind of passion, creating the videos. I can't draw, but maybe it's my little canvas. I like creating these things. I like to think these things out. It helps me learn it better. If I'm explaining it to someone else, I have to go and learn it at a deeper level. Yeah. So I just enjoy doing it. And I'll be honest, I love it when someone comments, hey, this was great. I finally understand it. Or I got this certification because of this, or this really helped me out. I've got this new role. So I get pleasure out of that when it does that. I saw a comment, are you an Aussie? And I'm going to say, great. No, I'm not. I'm English. So everyone asks me, you're Australian. I'm from the poor bit of England. So I have the south of the river accent. I don't
wait, what are you saying? Australians are the poor English people?
Right,
No.
I'm the poor English person. I don't sound like Hugh Grant or the Queen. I've got the commoner. So I'm from South London, which is why a lot of people say, hey, you Australian? It's like, no, I'm just poor.
Yeah, that's right. You're a poor Australian who just happens to be in Texas.
Yeah, I'm not moved.
Well, let's do it that way. But it's funny. I'm glad you. Wonder I keep getting my echo for some reason. So the next question that I have for you, because I wanted to touch on this as well, because I feel like a lot of the next generation of people coming in, they connect with the videos more. Mm-hmm. We've been answering questions around Azure and in terms of going into what's the right foundational pieces, where do you start learning? I think there's a question, a couple of questions around from Chris and Vineet and other people as well. What I wanted to know is, for people who are from, I guess, upcoming generation, they love watching videos, they love creating videos. Mm-hmm. And for people who are trying to get into this, because technology is not something people go and search for. Well, I guess I hope people go and search for YouTube videos and technology. That's why people like you and I would be found. But for people who are new, like, what do you recommend for them in terms of where should they start if they're trying to create YouTube videos or just videos in general for the technology space? Is there any advice that you have for them, considering you've been doing it for some time now?
Do you know, I think my advice would be, what is unique about you, and what are you confident and what do you enjoy? Like, when you think about videos, well, I could do technical how-to videos, I could do reviews, I could do opinion pieces, I could do just, hey, you're following the screen, I could do PowerPoint, I could do whiteboarding. Don't feel pressure to do what someone else does. That may not be your style. Everyone is unique. They have their own way of doing things. So I'd say, and what, do something you're passionate about. Don't pick something you think, oh, it's going to be popular and I'll get a bunch of views, but you don't like it. It's going to show through. You want to be passionate so you enjoy it, so you keep doing it. Don't make it something forced. So find a medium that you are comfortable with and find something you care about, you're passionate about, because that will come through in the content. And have a goal. Like, my goal is I want to try and help people. And I don't really have an ulterior motive behind it. That's my goal. Now, again, I'm lying if I said I didn't get pleasure when people write comments, say, hey, this helped me or whatever. That's great. I love that. But think about why you're doing it. If it's an entirely selfish goal, I think, again, it will kind of show through. Ideally, your goal is something about what the audience cares about, something that's going to benefit them. And I think if my mindset is, hey, I want to do X for the people watching, it's maybe educating them, maybe it's entertaining them, that should be top of mind. And then sure, that there will probably be benefits to come to you. But I think the first thing should be, what can I do for my audience? And then over time, hey, that'll probably be the audience does for you. But I think you have to start off with that mindset. What can I do to help the audience or entertain or whatever that might be? And what am I comfortable with? And you can grow. Initially, maybe I'm only comfortable with PowerPoint and I'm doing a voiceover. That's great. This is what you're comfortable with. And maybe over time, I can add a little webcam to the corner or something else, but you can evolve it.
And it's worthwhile calling out, right? I think people like you and I may do video, but that's not the only medium for people to share and help other people as well, because you were doing blogging for a long time.
Right. I mean, again, and it comes back to, you mentioned video, which is why I said video. But
yeah, of course, yeah.
I think, again, find the medium that you are comfortable with. Maybe I'd rather do just text. Maybe I'd just do like an audio podcast type thing. Yeah. Maybe I want to do video. But again, don't feel pressured by someone else. Your style, you may not want to do an audio, but hey, I'd love to share and help things. I'll do written word. That's fantastic. Yeah. Everyone has different preferences. some things work better from one medium or another. There's not a right or wrong. So I would say be true to yourself. What am I comfortable with? What am I passionate about? And take it from there.
Perfect. And I know we're kind of hitting the 1 hour mark as well. So I wanted to ask you one question that's just because I've seen you do motivational videos as well now in terms of I want to like, how do you like, what's your learning process to stay up to date, stay motivated? And like, I guess like, in terms of achieving life goals, like what's your recommendation for that? Because I think I've seen you mentioned the 5 thing that you live by.
I got my 5 rules, but I am super disciplined. So I honestly believe, and it's funny, I just posted a video Friday about how do you gain discipline. It's like 20 minutes long. I think you have to be disciplined. I think you have to, as a person, right? You have to think about what do you want most. Discipline is what do I want most over what I want now. Hey, what I want most is to learn this technology. What I want now is to sit on the couch and watch TV and eat donuts.
Oh, I love to do that.
You have to get discipline. If you get discipline and you can focus on what do I want most in life, what is that vision, that big vision, that's the key to success. And I'm lucky. I've always had good discipline. I get up at 3 a.m. every day. I work out, then I learn stuff. I create videos, then I work, then I have some family time, then I do some more work, and then I go to bed at 8 o'clock. Every single day, Monday to Saturday. That's my routine. Sunday, I sleep until 4 a.m. and then I work till about 4 p.m. So I am a creature of habit, discipline. So I'll say discipline, discipline, discipline.
Oh, so that's the foundational piece to kind of, I guess, build on something. To your point about what do you want versus what do you think you need right now, kind of.
What do I want most? What do I want most over what I happen to want at this particular minute, which might be to lay in bed a bit longer? That's discipline. And that, I think, is key to succeed in life.
That's very well said, John. Very well said. I'm going to switch gears, and I've got 3 questions, which are my fun questions.
Okay.
And I think you kind of answered the first question already. What do you spend most time on when you're not working on cloud or technology?
Fitness, training.
Yep. Ironman,
Ironman training, weightlifting. Yep.
When is your next Ironman coming up?
So it's supposed to be Texas, end of April. They just cancelled it because of COVID. So now it's Tulsa, which is end of May. So Ironman Tulsa, end of May.
Oh, so anyone who's listening is an Ironman person may end up come and say hi to you, I guess, from the podcast.
I'll be in Tulsa. Yep.
Yep. Perfect. What is something that you're proud of but is not on your social media?
So I post very little on social media about myself. I don't really post things like that. What am I proud of? Do you know, I taught Krav Maga for nine wow. Going on 10 years. And I guess what I'm proud of, I had people that maybe been the victims of abuse. And I gave them confidence back that they could approach the real world and things like that. So I guess that's I managed to give people their confidence back.
That's awesome. And I think I definitely recommend combat sports to people, though. To your point about the discipline, that kind of comes from that as well. I guess there's some elements there.
Yep.
Final question. What's your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share?
So Del Frisco's for steak and then Grimaldi's for pizza. So those are my 2 passion foods, steak and pizza. So
wait, is that your cheat meal?
I do not eat well. So I train so I can eat. I don't drink soda. I don't really drink caffeine. I don't eat sweets really, really much. But pizza, pasta, burgers, steak. That's me all day long.
Oh, right. Because I got a question from Chris saying which vegetarian food has most protein.
I would have no idea. I do not eat vegetarian food.
Maybe try tofu. I think tofu has got a lot of protein. But cool, man. I just want to say this was really awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time out. It was really good because I'm glad we were able to kind of add a few more layers to Azure Security best practices from what we've done in the past to what we're doing it now. And plus, we could talk about arm and bicep as well.
There you go.
No pun intended there.
I know.
But I do appreciate this. And for people who want to reach out to you for follow-up questions, where can they find you on socials?
So again, I don't, funnily enough, do a lot of the social stuff. So I have Twitter, I have LinkedIn, but really it's just to let people know about the videos. The best way to talk to me is about I read the comment section of my YouTube videos. So if I've done a video, you have a question, I'm very active looking at the comments. That's the best way to kind of interact with me.
Awesome. All right. I'll definitely recommend people do that. And I'll leave your YouTube channel in there, which I definitely recommend people checking out, especially if you're trying to keep yourself up to date, not just in Azure, but also different architecture patterns as well. I learned a lot of services from your videos, so I'm sure other people would find value from that as well. And I just wanted to do a quick shout out to all the folks on the Clubhouse, which is Frederick, Alexander, Eli, Mawson, Rami. Thanks everyone for hanging on. So I might close the Clubhouse room, and we will see you on the next week Clubhouse room, I guess. And I'll see everyone on the live feed on next week as well. But thanks everyone for coming in. And I'll see you next week. And you may see John on his YouTube videos next, I guess. All right. See you, everyone.